The breakout of riots in Minneapolis, Minnesota was a powder keg long in the making. The evidence for pre-planning and setting up a situation for a disaster is overwhelming. What you are about to see is part of a 2-year undercover investigation into the leftist radicalization embedded within the climate justice movements, one in particular, the Sunrise Movement.
These escalations, these actions can be really, really dangerous.
Uprisings, including actions like burning buildings, are legitimate and powerful forms of resistance.
So last night, when that police station went up in flames, me and my girlfriend, we poured shots. We were happy.
This moment in history is a coin toss between freedom and fascism.
In this first video, we are going to show you how the Sunrise Movement played an instrumental role in carrying out mayhem in the name of bringing about the Green New Deal. We have sources within these groups to get to the bottom of where all of this leftist radicalization is coming from and what their end game is.
And any politician must back a Green New Deal or make way for the leadership who will.
We have their plans, manuals, intercepted communications, and have recordings of their Zoom chats. The reason why the screens of these people in the Zoom are blurred is because they are minors. What we didn't expect to find were organizers radicalizing middle school and high school aged children, teaching them military tactics and preparation for high-risk actions. Some of these tactics include escalation provocation techniques, blocking freeway traffic, and how to get arrested, bogging down law enforcement in the name of destroying capitalism to make way for their Green New Deal.
Why be in school if we're not going to have a future?
What some parents may have thought were innocent youth organizations, genuinely fostered and ran by children, are actually monolithic structures with private intelligence military contractors and foreign interests influencing children to carry out their subversive objectives.
Everybody get arrested.
Powers come down.
Behind the Sunrise Movement is an organization called Momentum.
Just some quick things to keep in mind is that when we escalate, our target is always the public. So even if we're targeting a senator or another decision maker, escalation should be a response, not a reaction to what's going on. And I think again, just what that means is your escalation should be deeply grounded in your movement's DNA. It should be deeply grounded in your strategy, not just a knee-jerk sort of bottlenecked reaction.
Instead of studying in a classroom, we're building an army of young people across the country starting right now. So we'll be thousands strong by the time the election arrives.
They are calling on children to help escalate the mayhem.
These escalations, these actions can be really, really dangerous for a lot of folks. There's a lot of, especially I think with escalated actions, often police are involved, or there's there could be nasty onlookers, or you're doing an action in DC and there's a bunch of really evil MAGA teens over in the corner.
Notice they want privileged white suburban children to be on the front lines of the risk actions.
A really important thing to think about as Sunrise, which is right now a predominantly white and predominantly middle, upper middle, managerial class movement.
Every one of us has a lot of work to do to end these systems, and the more privilege we have in relationship to Blackness, the more responsibility we have to fight to end these systems.
It should be noted that Aaron Berger, the international advisor for the Sunrise Movement, is the CEO for Asymmetric Solutions, a military contracting company that specializes in military training, cybersecurity, and global strategies.
What's going on? Get girl! I will kill everybody here! Get down!
Organizers of these youth non-government organizations, or Youngos, embellish white supremacy as a systemic problem, hyper-focusing on statistically rare instances of racial inequality and injustice, while ignoring great strides of progress the United States has made over the past century towards equal opportunity and criminal justice reform.
Do you think that race plays a part in wealth distribution, or either a mindset that you can't
today?
Or cannot? Yeah.
No.
You don't?
No, I don't. Hey, you and I, we're proof. Why would race have anything to do with it?
A lot of white kids love rap.
Yes.
Explain that. What does that say to you? What's the message of it? What's the bigger picture of it?
I thought that was clearly a message that there was no such thing as racism.
To anyone who believes that America is institutionally racist, I'll challenge you to do this. Go into communities and deal with problems by examining the roots of those problems. Education, a family structure, the growth of liberalism to a point of progressivism beyond any imagined course.
What's your thought on Black Lives Matter?
Don't come at me with that dumb man.
President Trump has done a lot that positively affected the black community, but you won't ever hear the mainstream media talking about that.
Not all people who are locked up are individuals who don't deserve a second chance. And so this is about second chances and giving people opportunity.
The White House is championing a criminal justice reform bill that would, among other things, implement sentencing reforms, create programs to help inmates thrive on the outside, and grant early release for completion of those programs.
This council will coordinate efforts across the entire federal government to deliver jobs, investment, and growth to the communities that need it the most.
The Green New Deal is not about climate change. It's about climate justice. Essentially, they're blaming climate change on white people.
We won't have a Green New Deal that works for everyone unless we concurrently address the sickness that lies in the soul of America in things like white supremacy.
The events that erupted in Minneapolis, Minnesota, were not a spontaneous reaction to the murder of George Floyd. These were well-planned events, anticipating some perfect trigger points to bring about the new normal, a world without police, without borders, without industry, without wealth, without private property, without an economy. A world based on communist ideals embedded within the Green New Deal.
Organizers on the ground need money right now. We got to move that money to our comrades.
However, in order to normalize policies set forth by the Green New Deal, crises have to be capitalized on to further their agenda while destroying the great accomplishments of civil rights movements of the past.
The facts show that 50 years of epic civil rights battles for specific rights, and after 3 decades of changing social and political realities, a once oppressed people are no longer that.
The breakout of riots in Minneapolis, Minnesota was a powder keg long in the making. From abusive police training, utilizing warrior and fear-driven tactics, to key radical players and organizations put in place.
And it's khakis and a white shirt covered in swastikas, goes up in flames.
Thousands of people here, and the police don't really have it separated between the people pro-Trump and the people against Trump.
This is Minneapolis, Minnesota.
What led up to George Floyd's death was avoidable and unnecessary. The evidence for pre-planning and setting up a situation for a disaster is overwhelming. The goal was to kick off a national and international revolution of the likes the world has never seen, based off preventable and even instigated situations, creating political capital for leftist radicalization. In 2017, the stage had been set.
It needs to change now. It needs to start with each and every one of
The youth climate strike at the Minnesota State Capitol, a breeding ground for recruitment, was recorded and promoted by Unicorn Riot, a leftist media organization based out of Minneapolis, with video libraries promoting Antifa, who provided the most up-and-close coverage of the Minneapolis riots. Less than 2 days after George Floyd's murder circulated on social media, the Sunrise Movement organizers are already calling their young members to action.
We are currently witnessing, an uprising. I believe it's extremely important that we come together as a movement to look at the roots of this violence and resistance and what our work has to do with ending white supremacy. We are here to fight back collectively against that system.
So Black organizers and multiracial groups of organizers in Minneapolis have been building power in the city for years now. And part of what they've been able to do with that power is to bring a lot of the city on their side.
So not only does this organizer admit that the apparent chaos is organized and orchestrated, but suggested that setting buildings on fire is a legitimate form of resistance.
What we are seeing is not just chaos, we're actually seeing resistance and organizing. And what we know is that uprisings, including actions like burning buildings, are legitimate and powerful forms of resistance and are resisting brutal and violent and dehumanizing systems like white supremacy. And that property is something that can be recovered.
So behind this alleged climate change movement is the goal of abolishing law enforcement and no longer having police.
These are organizations that have built strength and power over the past 6 years of the Black Lives Matter movement in Minneapolis, running strategic campaigns to defund the Minneapolis Police Department, oriented around a vision of the abolition of police. So the idea that we're actually fighting for a world without police. And these campaigns that folks are running are strategic and they're winnable. And we can make huge gains toward it in moments of uprisings like these.
Notice they are segregationists, not much different from the white supremacists they point at as perpetuating systemic white supremacy.
So we are going to head into breakout groups based on our racial identities.
Yep, so white folks, you're gonna stay here. Just don't click anything, just hold tight. Black African-American folks, here's your link, and non-Black POC folks, here you go as well.
Gabby's going to redrop in the chat the 4 groups that are on the front lines of this fight. Black Visions, Reclaim the Block, Louisville Community Bail Fund, and Dream Defenders.
Wow, they were already in the works to get funds to rioters to help them mobilize and bail them out of jail. Keith Ellison, an Antifa-supporting Democrat, former representative and deputy chair of the Democrat National Convention, is the current Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. Ellison was in a position to push for criminal justice reform prior to George Floyd's murder. So why didn't he? Ilhan Omar, the radical progressive Minnesota representative whose district includes Minneapolis, was alleged to have been seen mingling with Antifa protesters at a Trump rally in Minnesota 7 months earlier with her married boyfriend, Tim Minette. Though the Democrat mayor demanded that brutal police tactics be restricted in Minneapolis, the tactics were allowed to continue. Notice the organizations and some of the most outspoken Democrats against President Trump actually facilitated, if not helped, in the